Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to prepare the ledger accounts for allowance for impairment of trade receivable. I know this is a confusing topic. Let me use a timeline with two scenarios to help you sort out the mess. Come, let's start. You will often see this phrase debt estimated to be uncollectible. So which account should you be reminded of? Allowance for impairment of trade receivable. Let's combine this phrase with at end of year 1 and 1000. So what does that mean? Very simple. It simply means that the ending balance for the allowance account at end of year 1 is $1,000. So in this case, if you go on and look at the end of year 2, it will be 1005. And finally, at the end of year 3, it will be 800. So how should we record this in the allowance account? For year 1, we know that the ending balance is 1000, and for us to have the ending balance of 1000, we will need to credit the allowance account with 1000. So the double entry would be debit impairment loss on trade receivable 1000 and credit allowance for impairment of trade receivable. So in summary, there are two steps. The first step is to determine the ending balance. The second step is to determine the entry to arrive at the ending balance. Now for year 2, the ending balance is now 1005. As the previous balance is only 1000, we will need to credit the allowance account 500 in order to arrive at the ending balance of 1005. The double entry will be debit impairment loss on trade receivable 500 and credit allowance 500. So again, step 1 is to determine the ending balance of 1005, and step 2 is to determine the credit entry of 500 to arrive at the ending balance. Now for year 3, the ending balance is 800. As the previous balance is 1005, we will need to debit the allowance account by 700 to determine to arrive at the ending balance of 800. We call this kind of entry reversal as the ending balance is reduced from year to year. So once again, step 1 is to determine the ending balance of 800, and step 2 is to determine the debit entry of 700 to arrive at the ending balance. Let's do a bit of revision. In the N-level syllabus, impairment loss is recognized when there is any sign that the debt is uncollectible. The business does not wait until the debtor to be bankrupt before recognizing the loss. So in this case, where the trade receivable is uncontactable for weeks, the double entry will be debit impairment loss on trade receivable and credit allowance for impairment of trade receivable. The allowance account is created to recognize the possible loss in trade receivables. Now let's take the case whereby the trade receivable has become bankrupt. What will be the double entry? The double entry will be debit allowance for impairment of trade receivable and credit trade receivable. Let's try to understand the double entry. We credit the trade receivable because the debt is no longer collectible. Let me highlight in yellow. So as for allowance, we debit allowance because the possible loss has become a confirmed loss. Now let's add bankruptcy to the timeline. Let's assume that there is a bankruptcy in year 2 and also there is a bankruptcy in year 3. In year 2, the bankruptcy of 300 will reduce the allowance account balance to 700. However, the ending balance at the end of year 2 remains at 1005. As such, we need to credit 800 to the allowance account to have an ending balance of 1005. The same steps still apply. Step 1, determine the ending balance of 1005. Step 2, determine the credit entry of 800 to arrive at the ending balance. In year 3, the bankruptcy of 300 will reduce the allowance account balance to 1002. However, the ending balance at the end of year 3 remains at 800. So we need to debit 400 to the allowance account to have an ending balance of 800. The same steps remain, that is to determine 1, the ending balance of 800 and 2, the debit entry of 400 to arrive at the ending balance. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that this video has been useful for you to understand the allowance account. What I would suggest for you to do is to pause the video at times you are not sure and go back again. I deliberately say it slowly so that you can digest the facts slowly. Thank you for your time. If you like what I'm doing, please share this video with your friends and also get them to join the POA Tutor Telegram group. Bye bye.